You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous. Her loyalty is only to the family she serves. She will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change, who are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating a space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were born wild. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. I'm your host, Sophia Henderson, and today I have with me Jordan, who's going to share her birth story. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name's Jordan, and I am a first-time mom to a 4.5-month-old. We had our son Bodhi March 9th with Leah and Sophia. And it's me, Bodhi, and my husband Narin at home.
March, I'm like reflecting back. We had so many people do, and then when March ended, we were like, did they all have their babies? It felt so smooth. Like plenty of time in between. Like sometimes you just feel like it's like all the babies at once, but they were just like beautifully spaced. We really appreciated March.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that because, leading up to the birth, you were sharing birth stories that you guys had, recently, and it was 24, 36 hours. And I was like, okay, strap in, here we go. And then it ended
Mhm.
up being really quick and efficient. So that
Yeah,
was
and we had this string of first-time moms, I think, who just like got her done.
great.
More of that for
Yeah,
everyone.
totally.
Okay, well, we're jumping ahead a little. Let's start at the beginning and whatever that means for you, your conception journey, or when you realized you wanted to be a mom. Where is that?
Yeah, so that journey is really interesting because it changed a lot throughout, sort of my adulthood. I think as a kid, I knew I wanted to be a mom always. I loved babies and just felt very maternal. I'm the oldest sibling and have young cousins, and that just always felt really natural to me. And Narin and I have been together now for coming up on 11 years. Yeah. We've been together for a long time, hadn't really talked about kids, at the beginning of our relationship. And I think the further along we got, there was a point where I was like, I don't think I need kids. Like it doesn't really feel like that's something that I need in my life, and I think we'll be cool without kids. But what I didn't know was that that opinion and that view was shaped by a total hormone dysregulation that I was experiencing.
Mhm.
I was on hormonal birth control for many years, like so many women my age, without a second thought, just like, oh, this is what you do when you're in your 20s. And then getting off of birth control, I felt like I was really intentional about other aspects of my life and approaching things in a very natural way. And the last thing for me was hormonal birth control. And that didn't feel like it aligned. So I stopped taking the pill and knew that it would probably take a while for my period to return. So it didn't stress me out too much that it didn't come back right away. But this was July of 2019. And then it's a year and no period. And then it's 2 years. And then it's 3 years. And it was starting to concern me a bit. And I had no idea why or what was going on. I've always been into health and nutrition, so I felt like I should know what was going on. And it was this sort of, shameful thing where I feel like I'm doing all of the right things in my life, but this huge aspect of my womanhood is out of whack. So I was seeing, standard OBs, and everybody's solution was to put me back on hormonal birth control, which didn't sit right with me or make any sense because sort of felt like that had a huge part in the reason my period was missing in the first place. The PCOS diagnosis was tossed around a little bit, but I also, having done my own research, felt like I did not have PCOS. I had no signs or symptoms, nothing. But at the same time, getting into the sort of hypermasculine biohacky health and wellness space, I was doing a lot of intermittent fasting and I was eating very low carb. I had been a vegan for, 10 years up until right around the time I stopped taking birth control. So I think nutrient depletion was, playing a role for sure. I was doing high intensity workouts 7 days a week at 5 a.m. I was drinking black coffee until 10, 11 in the morning. So I think a lot of these practices that I associated with health were just wrecking my hormones. And I thought it was, oh, I was on birth control for such a long time. That's why my period hasn't come back. And I think that was a part of it. But I think that all of the other ways that I was putting my body under stress unintentionally were not allowing my body to feel safe enough to reproduce. So
Form of birth control were you on?
I was on the pill, just like a
Okay.
combo pill. And I think that that definitely threw things. But then all of these other practices were just stressing my body out to the point where it shut down reproduction. So my final visit to an OB just upset me so much that I was like, you know what? I'm figuring this out on my own. No one's going to help me but myself. So I started doing a lot of reading and researching around the ways that these practices affect women differently from men. All of the research on intermittent fasting, for example, is done on men or postmenopausal women. And those hormones are very easy to predict and understand in those groups of people. But for a woman in her reproductive years who has, or should have a 28-day cycle, the hormonal system is so much more delicate and reactive to stress. So I finally sat down and had to get real with myself. I think I was also just like undernourishing in terms of calories daily. And I had to really sit down and get real and say, okay, how am I unintentionally doing this to myself? So for me, it was a 2-year process really to like slowly come out of the way I had conditioned myself to believe I needed to live and to eat and to move and all of these things for quote health. And it really started first with, okay, maybe I'm going to eat breakfast, after so many years of skipping breakfast. So that was kind of the first thing that I did. And then it was, okay, maybe I need to introduce some whole food carbohydrates. And so that was the next thing I did. Maybe I shouldn't be drinking black coffee on an empty stomach before my workout. So it was all of these little practices. And I started to feel better, but still wasn't seeing any shifts in my period coming back. And then I had to dig a little bit deeper and look at other lifestyle practices outside of just food. And I started, taking sunrise walks every day and to lower that morning cortisol. I started eating breakfast, a protein heavy breakfast within 30 minutes of waking up before I had any caffeine. So I had to get a little more granular. And this was in November of 2023. I started to feel like things were coming back online a little bit. Like I started to feel some breast tenderness and, I started to notice a little bit of water retention. And these were signs I was like, okay, I have a feeling something is brewing, but I don't know for sure. And, I had those physical symptoms, but then I started to feel a lot more calm in my body. I started to feel a little bit more fluid and softer and not this very rigid sort of go-getter energy that I think I was just living off of adrenaline and cortisol for such a long time that once my body finally relaxed, my period came back November of 2023 after 4.5 years.
Wow.
It was almost instant that I was like, oh my God, I want to be a mom
Wow.
like right now. So
Oh, you gave me chills.
I mean, I can't explain it. It makes sense that I didn't have any sort of feminine hormones circulating in my body. So that sort of instinct, that maternal instinct was gone. It totally makes sense. And then when things came back into place, it was this deep, deep desire that I could not ignore. And I brought it up to Naren, which he was like, whoa, like, where did that come from? Because for such a long time, you were totally okay with not having kids. And he was like, okay, yeah, I'm open to it, but maybe a couple years. But him and I weren't actively trying to prevent pregnancy. And
Mhm.
I think that for me, I just thought it was going to be challenging to get pregnant when I wanted to because things had been so out of whack for such a long time. But we were just we weren't trying, but we weren't trying to prevent either. And then I had my period for 6 months and then I got pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a really, really quick turnaround. It was
After four
really,
years.
yes, yes. Well, yeah, exactly. After my period came back, it was really quick. And I was kind of shocked, but also not at the same time because I, knew I was ovulating, and I was like, well, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna
Yeah.
be this time. And it was funny. A friend actually had texted me and said, I had a dream you were pregnant, and we were in your living room, and you were dancing around, and you had a snake wrapped around you. And I had been on a hike that day, and I saw a snake on my hike. So I was like, you know what? Let's just take a couple tests and see. And I was pregnant. And yeah, it was pretty magnificent.
That's amazing. Have you seen the documentary, The Business of Birth Control by Ricky Lake?
No, but I have heard about it so much. I think I need to watch it. But I've heard her speak on podcasts and heard other people talk about what hormonal birth control has done to, women's hormones and how it manipulates your attraction to your partner and your brain chemistry. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, yeah, it was an amazing listen. You should watch it.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Well, so take us into your pregnancy. How do you land on home birth?
Um, I I don't think it was ever even a question for me. I have never pictured my birth in a hospital ever. My mom is a labor and delivery nurse with Kaiser, and long before I was pregnant, had said to her, "Would you deliver my baby?" And she said, "Yeah, but I think I'd be too nervous looking at all the monitors." And in my head, I was like, "What
Mm.
monitors? Like, are you talking about monitors? I meant
You,
at home. Would you birth
you
my
two
baby?"
had very different visions.
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't even a question for me. There was just no other way I pictured having a baby. It just did not feel natural to be in that setting.
And so
So
then did you tell her that you pictured home and what was her reaction?
I was really afraid to tell her. I had met with you guys really early. I think I was like 6 weeks pregnant when I met with you guys.
Joke that some people pee on a stick and call us,
That's
and
basically
others
what I did.
it takes a
Yeah,
while.
that's basically what I did. But it's so weird because I found out so early, and then it's like, well, nothing can really happen for, a little while. So just hang tight. But you're so excited, you
Yeah.
want to get the process started. But I didn't tell her for a while that I was going to do a home birth. I was afraid that she would, not that she can tell me no, but that she wouldn't be supportive or would try to convince me otherwise. I was sort of hinting at it, kind of dancing around it, not wanting to actually tell her. And then she had said to my younger sister, who told me, I think Jordan wants to have a home birth, but she's too afraid to tell me. And she said, I just want her to do what she thinks is best, and I want her to have her birth experience. So I think I should have given my mom a little bit more credit because,
I got chills number two on your story.
yeah, I was so not what I was expecting. She's been an L&D nurse for, man, I don't know, 20 years. So I just figured that because she's in that system that she thought a certain way, but she's a lot more open-minded than I think a lot of folks would think, Kaiser L&D nurse would be. And once I told her, it was a big relief because then I could share fully the experience with her and tell her about our visits and, what we were preparing for. But I don't think I told her until I was like, I don't know, well into my second trimester. And then from there, she was really, really excited and happy and along for the ride. Yeah. So it was a cool experience being able to share that with her. I wish I told her earlier, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, take us into the pregnancy and just anything you want to touch on, like any labs you decided to do or not do, or just how you were taking care of yourself, any hiccups along the way, prenatally. What was pregnancy like for you?
Yeah, so pregnancy was lovely. I loved being pregnant. I'm grateful to say that it was all pretty easy for me. First trimester is just, the first trimester. I never threw up, but I was pretty nauseous throughout the whole day from weeks like 7 to 12. But once I hit that 12-week mark, it just disappeared overnight.
Do you placenta?
Yeah, seriously. No, I couldn't believe it. It was literally overnight. I was like, whoa, I don't feel sick today. And
Mhm.
then it was, never happened again. The interesting thing was because I was previously at the beginning of my pregnancy on Kaiser insurance, getting labs done
Mhm.
and those sorts of things, I was receiving parallel care because of insurance billing. So I was going in to see an OB and I was also working with you. And it was really interesting to have both experiences to compare.
Mhm.
Um, and the OB I was seeing was nice, but I didn't feel like warmly cared for. It was really cut and dry. Come in, we do this thing. Have any questions? Okay, see you later. I didn't feel like I had developed a relationship with her at all. I
That's
told
what
her,
I've been hearing lately is that like midwifery care, the big difference is it's like relationship-based care.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And I told her in the first visit that I was planning on a home birth. And she sent me a packet via email about the perils of home birth. So that,
Wow, they have a
yeah,
packet.
they have a packet. They have a packet. And I didn't read it. And I just kind of shrugged it off.
Hmm.
Um, it's little things like that, or you answer your questionnaire at the beginning, like, have you ever in your life used recreational drugs? And if you answer yes, they want to send you to a counselor. So it doesn't feel,
Where we're like, who hasn't?
that's what I'm saying. It doesn't feel personal at all. It just feels like they're checking boxes. And I was getting labs done, and I think you all had said to me, "Did you get prenatal labs done? Because there's some stuff missing from your results." And I asked my OB, "What about, this test or whatever?" And she was like, "Oh, you know what? Looks like we never ran those." And I'm, into my second trimester, and there's a lot of things that were just missed, or I don't know. It's very confusing to me how that happens. But I was going in for parallel care, and just even Naren experiencing the difference between the two. He's like,
Hmm.
man, this is not a fun environment to be in.
Hmm.
Doesn't feel, it doesn't feel warm. It doesn't feel personal. It just
Hmm.
feels really clinical and not great. So, I kept doing those visits just on a needed, like a necessary basis. But everything was pretty normal. I did most labs, genetic testing, we did all of that. I had a total of two ultrasounds, one at the very beginning and then the anatomy scan, and then sort of opted out of anything else just because everything was looking normal and I intuitively felt like I didn't need more than that. The gestational diabetes test was interesting. I used the fresh test and got that done, and that was all good, which was a great alternative because at one of those visits, they handed me the regular old glucola. And
And so did you do fresh test at Kaiser or with us?
so at Kaiser.
It's
So,
great for people to know that they will accept that option.
well, I did not tell them that I was doing
Oh,
it.
well, it's
So,
great to know how to get that option.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I just bought, my mom is the one who told me about it actually. She was like, just buy it online and you drink it at home. You don't tell them you're drinking it, and then just go into the office and do your test.
Yeah.
And with that test, I was very strategic about the way I approached it. And
Mhm.
the interesting thing, and you can speak to this in more detail, I'm sure, but when I was looking into the gestational diabetes test for a woman who eats primarily whole foods and is on, a moderate carb diet, that sort of bolus of sugar, your body may not respond to it very well because it's not used to ingesting that much at once. So that made me a little nervous because you don't want to get some sort of false reading because you're consuming 50 grams of glucose, which you'd never do in another setting.
Yeah.
I think that, leading up to it, I was making sure I was eating whole food carbohydrates, not restricting them, not going overboard. Um, and then the morning of, ate a really high fat and high protein breakfast, low carbohydrate breakfast.
That's usually a
Yeah.
recommendation. Yeah, try balance it. Hmm.
Yeah, I went on a walk, made sure I exercised that morning. I drank the glucola. I was like doing air squats in the
Not
weight,
glucola, right?
or
Fresh
not. Oh, I'm
test.
sorry. No,
Yeah.
you're right. Did not drink glucola. Um, Fresh test. I, went to the doctor, like walked a lap around the parking lot. I was doing like calf raises in the waiting room.
They're like, your glucose looks great, but you're out
Yeah,
of breath.
I know, I know. That came back and that was great. Then, right around the beginning of my third trimester, my insurance changed because Naren and I got married and I went on his insurance. So I stopped working with Kaiser and I never went and saw another OB after that because there was not much left. Once you're in your third trimester, there's not a ton. And
Waiting game, yeah.
yeah, exactly. I didn't do GBS, and I think that maybe is one of the last things that you test for, sort of right there at the end. So it was just like a total waiting game through the third trimester. I stayed really active the whole pregnancy, which I think was helpful, and ate a lot of really mineral rich, nutrient dense foods, trying to make sure, on top of a prenatal, but trying to make sure I was eating a lot of choline rich foods, a lot of iodine rich foods, a lot of folate,
Mhm.
things like this. So making sure I was on top of it. Food aversions weren't terrible in the first trimester, but I definitely wanted carbs, and that's pretty much it. And Once that subsided, I was able to even out a little bit. And then through the third trimester, stayed really as active as I could, lots of walks, light weightlifting up until the day before Bodhi was born. And of course, you never know it's the day before, but that was a huge piece of pregnancy that I think was really helpful in the birth.
Do you want to speak a little bit to towards the very end of your pregnancy, the like heart rate stuff that we were seeing? Because that was just like a little
Yeah.
piece of your story, but interesting.
Yeah, so I had never had any sort of, alerts in any of our visits, like, oh, this thing looks a little off, or,
Mhm.
maybe take a look at this. But I think it was maybe our last visit. Bodhi had a high heart rate. And I was like, oh my God, like what's happening? Why now? I don't know how far along I was, what, like 38 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, 39.
30, yeah. I was like, okay, this is not the time that I want to hear that things might be, abnormal. And you were over and you had said, if you want Leah to come by and to run it again just to see where things are at, it's totally your decision. But, this is what we found and just want to let you know and be aware, but do what you feel is best. So I kind of sat with it for a little bit. I didn't feel like anything was different in my body. Like I was still feeling him move just as much. I talked to my mom about it and she was like, it would be worse if his heart rate was low. That would be more concerning, but maybe we just caught him at a time that he was really active and really excited. So, I wouldn't worry about it, but have Leah come over if you feel like you just want some reassurance.
Hmm.
So I sat with that for a little while and decided to not do anything about it. Things felt fine in my body, and I just felt like we could go ahead and see how things were shaping up after that. And then I went into labor 4 days later. I was like, was he just gearing up, getting ready? And I don't know if that's something that happens near the end or what, but yeah, that was a little like rattled me a little bit because I hadn't heard anything like that the whole time.
Yeah. And so typically he had been in like the 140s pretty consistently. And then he was, on average in the like low 160s, but he would go up and stay for a little while, even into the 180s, which we were like, oh,
Mhm.
that's just out of character for him and, kind of outside of range. But his baseline wasn't like too elevated. So yeah, we were just like, let's just notice it. And like, you let us know if you're needing more reassurance. But then he just decided to come.
Right. And
Yeah.
then do you remember, now this is actually bringing me back. I think I was 37 weeks potentially. And I woke up and I was really, really crampy. And I
Hmm.
was like, okay, is today the day? And I think I let you guys know. It still feels like Braxton Hicks, but it's consistent and very regular. So I'm not sure if this means something's starting or what, but I kind of felt nauseous and let you guys know. And you said, okay, keep us updated. And if anything progresses, give us a message. And it didn't. It just
Hmm.
kind of stayed that way throughout the day. And the next day, I didn't feel awesome either, but still nothing was really progressing. And then felt fine,
Hmm.
2 days later. So
Yeah.
that was a weird little like false alarm. I thought it was going to happen. It was like, could have bet money that it,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
happening.
As soon as you feel like you know how it's going to go, babies are like, uh-uh.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, take us to your labor and your birth. How was that? What was that experience like?
Yeah. I mean, I looking back, I loved it. I loved the experience. Like I
Mhm.
would do labor a million times over. I woke up the morning of March 8th and had lost my mucus plug, but I knew that that wasn't an indication that things were going to be happening quickly or, that soon. It could be, but it could also not be. So I let you all know that. And that was a Saturday. Noreen was home and we were just kind of sitting outside in the garden. And I was having contractions and I knew they were different from Braxton Hicks because they felt deeper. It wasn't that like hard top belly. It felt, deeper in my uterus. And it was nothing that I couldn't do my day through, just was resting and hanging out and doing my normal day and was keeping you guys updated. Like I said, I had heard so many stories of these really, really long labors that I didn't want to get too excited thinking it was going to happen very soon because it could have been that early labor stage for, days. That night we had eaten a late lunch and I was like, I don't really know if I'm feeling like having a huge dinner. Maybe I'll just have like this little thing. And Noreen was like, no, I think you need to like eat a real meal tonight. I just have a feeling you should probably eat. And I was like, okay, fine. Like I don't need to, And so I did, and we sat down on the couch to watch a movie at maybe like 8:30 and was still having contractions. They started to get a little bit stronger, and I was starting to have to like close my eyes and breathe through them. And then I had to start getting up and walking around. I couldn't sit down anymore. And that's when Noreen was like, oh, okay, I think things are happening.
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay, maybe we should go get the bed ready, put on the mattress cover and the extra sheets that we bought and, whatever. And Noreen said, I don't really want to sleep on those. I was like, I don't think we're sleeping. I don't think anyone's
You're
going to
like,
bed.
buddy, you had me eat a big dinner. Come on.
Exactly. I know, right? So we went upstairs and I was like, let's do it now while I can help you because I have a feeling that very soon I will not be able to. So, we went upstairs, changed the sheets, and it was probably 10:30 by this point, and I laid on the bed. And at that point, I was having to sort of vocalize through the contractions, and they were pretty intense, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't. It never got to the point where I was like, I can't do this. It was just riding the waves. And I was laying on my bed. My cat had decided to lay right on my belly, and that was fine for a little bit until I was like, okay, everyone off. Like, I need to be free of anything touching me at this moment. So Noreen laid out a yoga mat, and I was on my hands and knees, the same place I was when you guys got there,
You
stayed there.
never moved.
Nope, never moved. And he was doing sort of counter pressure on my hips, and contractions were very intense at that point. And then as he was doing the counter pressure, my water broke. So I was far into active labor when my water broke. And then he was like, should I call the midwives? I think it was midnight at this point. I was like, yeah, give him a call. But I didn't want to call you guys too early. So he called Leah. I think it was probably midnight, and she lives, 5 minutes away from us. She was like, okay, what's the color? How's she doing? I'll sort of start getting things together, mosey on over. And I think it was probably 12:20 by the time she got there.
Mhm.
And she walks upstairs and she was like, oh my God, are you pushing? I was like, yeah. So she ran down to her car and got her bag and, all the stuff. And I think for those next couple of hours, it was just riding those waves of pushing. And the interesting thing is, and I didn't know this, but you don't push, like your body just does it. I don't feel like I was doing anything. It
I always
was
say it's
just,
like vomiting down,
yes.
you know?
Yeah, exactly. You have no control. So I was like, okay, my body is just pushing, and all my job is to not inhibit this action.
Mhm.
So it was just a lot of breathing and trying to move as slowly as I could and resting really deeply in between. Those were the most, like, I want to say psychedelic moments in between contractions. Just is the deepest rest you've ever experienced. And you're also in another world,
Mhm.
like you forget what's going on almost.
Mhm.
And then your body just pulls you right back into the moment. And it's just sort of allowing it to do its thing and to ride the waves and just be there, breathing and welcoming the sensation.
It's like, yeah, how many women get to experience true physiological birth where we are just witnessing and holding space. We're not like trying to problem solve or micromanage, it's just
Right.
being there
Yeah.
and witnessing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so incredible. And everyone has their own ideal birth, but for me to have been divorced or disconnected from that sensation and that process, it just wouldn't have been the same experience for me. Like I'm so appreciative to have gone through all of that. It's a true transformation, and I'm so grateful to have experienced that because there's nothing in the world like it. So it was, just that act of welcoming the sensation and going through it for a couple hours. And Leah had asked if I wanted vitals, and I could not fathom even moving from the position I was in. So, I said, not right now, but, maybe later. And she used the Doppler to check his heart rate, every so often, and things were looking good. Um, and we had the birth tub inflated, and I was like, my God, I must have so much further to go because we haven't even filled it yet.
That's what you were thinking.
I wanted so bad to get in that tub because I was like, that will allow me to rest a little bit. I could like put my head, like I wanted so badly to get in the tub. And I was like, I must have so much further to go because we're not even filling it. And then all of a sudden, Leah was like, we can see hair. And I was like, oh, I'm not getting in the tub.
Yeah, we weren't filling it because we're like, you're not gonna make
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And she was like, if you reach down, you can touch his head. But I couldn't even move a muscle. I was like, nope, I'm right here. And that's the only place I can be. And the interesting thing for me was the crowning because they don't go back in after that, you know? So you have this head in your birth canal, and those moments of rest in between, you still have that head in your birth canal. So it's like, oh, this is the moment where I need to be moving as slowly as I possibly can, breathing. You hear Bodhi in the background. Breathing as deeply as I can because this is the moment, you know, where things could, I don't want to make myself move faster than my body wants to. So that was the hardest part, I think, was sitting with his head right there crowning and knowing, okay, it's just a couple more pushes, but slow down and take your time.
Mhm.
So it was then, and I heard Leah tell Naren to come behind me, and he was there, and it was one big push after that, and he was out, and he came out crying, and Naren caught him and, you know, slid him back underneath me, and it was just the most euphoric sense of relief and gratitude and pride in myself and in my body and meeting this baby who you've just dreamt of for the last 10 months. And it was the best day of my life.
Beautiful. I know, and I feel honored I also got to be there to witness it. And I don't
I am so happy you all
usually
got to be
attend
there.
births together.
I
Carissa
know.
had injured her knee. She was so sad. She had to miss a few births while she was figuring out if she needs surgery or what. And so Leah and I were attending births together for a little while. And yeah, so we both got to be there. It was so sweet.
I'm so happy to have had you both there because, you know, working with both of you throughout the pregnancy, it felt right that you were both there, but I know that not everybody gets
Usually
that.
we're like, you don't want us both there because that means it's a long time and we need to
Yeah.
relieve each other.
Yeah. And then the craziest thing too, because I think in total from active labor to birth, it was probably like 5 hours. But the crazy thing that we all were sort of laughing about was that was the day of daylight savings.
Right,
And
I forgot that piece.
yeah, so he technically was born at 2:43. At 2 a.m., it became 3 a.m. And
Right.
so he was born at 3:43. So we like skipped this whole hour
Yeah, I had
in the
made a
night.
note because I was like, why does it look like we haven't done anything in an hour? Like we haven't listened to the baby or, offered any support because we usually
Yeah.
have like when we're charting, like half-hour chunks of what's going on and what we're doing. I was like, why all of a sudden has it said it's been over an hour? And we were like, oh, daylight time. So I made a
Yeah.
little
It
note.
was
We didn't ignore her for an hour.
right. Yeah. It
Yeah,
was
interesting.
such a special time. And, you know, him being born at the beginning of March, everything was starting to bloom and the time had just changed. So it was light later and it was
So
just
interesting.
such
When I'm
a
looking
long
at your birth summary, you actually were in labor probably an hour less than what this says,
wow.
because
Yeah.
it probably added on that hour. It's just
I'm
looking at
sure it did.
times. So that's funny.
Yeah, it was quick. It was much quicker than I expected it to be.
Yeah,
And I'm grateful for that. It never once felt like something I couldn't do or couldn't handle. It just, you know, couldn't have had a better birth, honestly. It
beautiful.
was great. Although I did lose quite a bit of blood.
I was just about to ask you to like check
Yeah.
in about immediate postpartum and bleeding and placenta and initial breastfeeding. Will you talk about that?
Yeah, I didn't feel weak or it didn't feel in my body like I had lost a lot of blood, but I think that you and Leah were both hinting at it without scaring me, you know?
How do you
Um,
feel?
yeah, right. You lost a good amount of blood. So how are you know what I mean? So Naren was like, I think it was probably a little bit more serious and they wanted to let on, but
But since you
I
felt
felt fine.
good, because like that, obviously blood loss is important. And somebody could technically not hemorrhage and feel really symptomatic. And we would take that more seriously than someone who technically had a hemorrhage, but feels really great, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, I felt great. And I don't know if that was just like running on adrenaline or what, but I
Hmm.
didn't feel any symptoms of, excessive blood loss.
Hmm.
So that was good. It was just something to look out for over the next few weeks postpartum because
Recovery
that's when
was
I
what, yeah,
did
we
feel
really
a little,
focused on recovery. Yeah.
yeah. So in that moment, things felt fine. And I had, the birth tub was inflated. So I at least got to rest against it afterwards. That was like a nice little back rest that I had. So was just kind of sitting with Bodhi. And it was interesting to me because I just birthed a baby, but you still don't feel like you're fully empty because the placenta is still there. So I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I know the baby's out, but I still feel like there's lots
Full.
of stuff inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it had probably been, 40 minutes and you and Leah had said, okay, if you want to start to try to push the placenta, you could. This could be a good time. So I pushed and I felt a gush of something and I was like, ooh, good. And you guys were like, no, those are blood clots. I was like, oh, okay. Placenta's still in there.
Yeah.
So it took a lot more effort than I thought. I
Hmm.
thought that it would just come sliding right out, but it took a lot of pushing. So I was pushing, and Leah gave me a little bit of assistance. And once the placenta was out, then you are like, okay, now I'm empty.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm
that's when
finally
you feel,
postpartum.
yeah, exactly. And seeing the placenta was the most incredible thing. I mean, how many people have ever seen a placenta before they have a baby,
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was incredible. It was so much bigger than I thought it was, and it's so beautiful, the deep red and
Hmm.
Leah taking us through the sort of show and tell of it.
Show and tell, that's cute. We usually call it a tour, but maybe
Yeah.
I'll call it show and tell now.
Yeah. It was incredible. And just to see this thing that's been inside of you, attached to your baby, that your baby was, effectively living inside of now on the outside of your body.
Hmm.
I mean, there's nothing more incredible, I think, than a woman's ability to do this thing. So we then, I think, had moved to the bed and we were planning on doing a cord burning. So we got that set up and we held the candles, Noreen and I was holding Bodhi, and it took a long time for the cord to burn. Leo was like, okay, we got a thick cord here.
Hunker down.
Yeah, so I think we sat there with the candles for, probably 20 minutes. And, you know, it was special though because you get this moment where things are really soft and still. It's illuminated by candlelight
Hmm.
and it was really, really special. So once the cord was burned, I think Leah did her initial, checkup on Bodhi and making sure everything was good. And then she helped with the initial latch. And I don't think you can do all the, quote, preparation for breastfeeding that you want, but until you're actually doing it, it's hard to cognitively know something without the physical act of doing it. And his first latch, I was like, whoa, that hurts. And I don't think that I was prepared for how painful breastfeeding was going to be for me. And I don't think it's that for all women, but it was really so painful for me for a little while. And nothing was wrong. His latch was fine. There was nothing that needed to be fixed, but it's just my body getting used to that sort of sensation was really, really challenging. So I think it was probably, I don't know, a couple of weeks, and it definitely got better day to day. But at the beginning, my nipples were cracked and scabbed and bleeding and raw, and it was hard. But I didn't want I don't know, the initial latch is obviously the hardest, and then it's easy after the pain subsides, but I would like tense up and wince, and it was really challenging. But I didn't want to do that because I didn't want him to feel my discomfort and my tension and then have some like association with breastfeeding being unenjoyable or, whatever. So I just kind of tried to like bear down and breathe through it. But once it was better. And now it's awesome and easy and I love it. But the first couple weeks were challenging.
And you did have some like big hormonal experiences postpartum, as well as some mastitis. Will you
Oh
speak
God.
to those? Sorry to bring back memories.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the hormonal stuff, that was interesting because I was expecting it, just as my milk was coming in. And Leah and Carissa had been over like that 4-day visit. And they were like, okay, your milk's going to start coming in and you may feel like you're a little emotional or you're a little weepy and, a little fragile. And I was like, no, I'm feeling fine. Like things are great. And then that day after they left, I was like, oh my God, this is what they were talking about. So it was probably 4 days of just being exactly that, really emotionally fragile, crying about nothing and everything, and just feeling not, and I wouldn't compare it to like a feeling of depression, but I just felt really like fragile. That's the best word I can use. The first thing I cried about was that I was sad that my cat might feel like she's getting less attention.
Oh
You
my
know
God,
what I mean?
that's so
So
cute.
it's like stuff like that. Or I would listen to a song that was about the singer's baby, and that would just send me. Or I would sing to him and I couldn't even do it because it would make me
Mhm.
cry. So it was just everything and nothing at the same time. But 4 days went by and, things just started to feel a little bit more solid. So it wasn't bad compared to what it could have been, I don't think. But it was a big shift for sure. And then the mastitis thing, that I think I got mastitis 3 times in a month.
Wow.
And it happened probably, I don't know how many weeks postpartum I was, maybe like about a month in was the first time. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I was freezing and I had body aches, and it was that sort of like flu-like symptoms that I was experiencing. And I woke up with a big fever, obviously a very achy right breast, and it was, streaky and red, and all I could do was feed him and rest and hope that it went away. And it always went away within 24 hours. I never needed to seek, medical attention or antibiotics or anything. But I really think, and I've heard other women say this on your podcast as well, I think it was me just trying to do too much too soon.
Hmm.
And I felt good enough to be doing what I was doing, but that doesn't mean that I actually should have been doing those things, you know? So
Or
every
like you might feel like Superwoman, and Superwoman deserves to rest too.
That's exactly it. And I was like, okay, I hear you. So I would rest and it would get better. And after that third time, I haven't experienced it. But the resting was actually really challenging for me during the early weeks of postpartum. Like going into it, I was like, oh, 5, 5, 5. Of course I'll be in the bed, on the bed, and around the bed for 15
And then
days.
you're
And
like, what do you mean it's only been 12 hours?
exactly, exactly. So that was the hard part. And my mom and my sister were over. They came, a few hours after you all had left the day he was born. And they were staying for a week. And so, they're over and I wanted to be hanging out with them. And so
Mhm.
I had gone downstairs and stayed on the couch all day. And then Leah came over a couple days later and Rin was like, oh yeah, Jordan was downstairs on the couch. And Leah was like, do not use the stairs. So I was like, okay, fine. So then I really did force myself to stay in bed, and it was so necessary, but really, really challenging mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like with each pregnancy, women are always trying to improve on postpartum a little bit more each time, especially because
Yeah.
family dynamic changes each time too.
I mean, I think postpartum was tougher for me than all of pregnancy.
Yeah.
It was just a lot of shifts that you don't expect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear, like, if you were talking to a first-time mom, or if you were telling yourself over again, like, is there anything you would have done differently? Are there any tips, advice that you have for someone listening?
I mean, as far as pregnancy and preparation for birth go, I think I would do everything exactly the same, to be honest. I would prepare myself more for postpartum. I'm lucky that I have a husband who cooks really well and, every morning was bringing me homemade bone broth and oats and making sure I had snacks and filling my water. And he was really, really so incredibly helpful in the postpartum period. But I think that just preparing myself more for what breastfeeding would be like, um, and just sort of familiarizing myself with what the hormonal shifts could look like. You know what? I actually think one thing I might have done differently during pregnancy, I think that just given how much blood I lost during the birth, I probably would have incorporated some sort of like beef organ complex supplement leading up to birth, just in terms of blood building. I eat a lot of red meat, but I think, supplementing a little bit more with some blood building properties could have been helpful. But I think that going into pregnancy for a first-time mom, I would encourage people to be as active as they can be during pregnancy, because I feel really confident that that's why my labor was quick and relatively, easy. And I know that nutrition can be really tricky during pregnancy, but eating a protein heavy diet, I think, is super important too. And then in terms of prenatals, I'm sure that you all talk to women about this too, but the prenatal space is the Wild West, and not all are created equal. So making sure that you're choosing a prenatal that has, methylated B12 and folate versus folic acid, some of these bioavailable forms of nutrients. And I think that something else that helped me was not over consuming information. I feel like you can get lost in reading and listening and the courses and the this and the that and everyone else telling you what to do. And I think that that only takes you further away from your intuition and listening to your own body. So sort of trying to tune out the noise, because there's a million people telling you what to do. It doesn't matter if it's not true in your body.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Yeah. Oh my
If
gosh,
anyone wanted to reach out to you, how could they connect with you? And we'll leave it in the show notes.
Yeah, so before pregnancy, I actually worked with clients one-on-one for nutrition consulting. And now I'm diving deeper into women's hormones specifically because of my experience with my own journey. So I'm on Instagram at Jordan in the Sun, and I'm on Substack under the same name, and I share, information there as well. But shoot me a message on Instagram. We can connect that way.
Great. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe. If you'd like to follow along, you can find us on Instagram at Born Wild Podcast and Facebook. You can go to our website at www.bornwildmidwifery.com. See you later.